Well, welcome everybody. This is the very first episode of Rugby in a Different Light, and we're joined by three fantastic guests. Up there, down in the bottom corner on my screen is Bruce Aitchison, and Bruce is our super fan. For those that don't know Bruce, he's been around a little while, but he's also a well-known face in Scottish rugby. You've hosted many gala awards, webinars, dinners, a whole host of things. But his best thing that he's known for, I would think, is Happiness is Egg-Shaped. 20,000 followers he's got now. Regularly blogs about memories of Scottish rugby in Murrayfield and me. And if you haven't listened to that, it's a lovely, lovely, lovely podcast. So have a listen. And about to start work on BBC Alba, I believe. So he's getting out there. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing as well, because in 2001... he played for a really well-known Major League Rugby team called the Albany Knickerbockers. Is that right? Excellent.
That's right.
And he was also Journo's bodyguard, which again is a strange one because you don't look tall enough. But I presume he just threw you in front of people, did he? And then also Panto Dane, 3 years. We've got to talk about that at some point as well. But that's obviously for when your career's behind you. Oh, yes, it is. That kind of thing. But anyway, it doesn't pay his bills. So his real job is being a housemaster, I believe. Is it Merchiston Castle School? Is that right, Merchiston?
Merchiston Castle School.
Merchiston in Edinburgh. So really great guest to have. We've also been very, very lucky. We've got Rachael Burford. She's our professional. She's an ex-England World Cup winner and captain. Over 100 caps for England at both 15s and 7s. That's right, isn't it? And she joined Harlequins as captain in 2017. Off the field, she's founded the Girls Rugby Club, a global platform aimed at providing a pathway for girls and women to get into rugby and within rugby. And in 2016, she became the first female professional player to be elected to the Rugby Players Association Players Board, which is an amazing achievement. You sit on 2 advisory boards now, I believe, and committees in World Rugby, and is a regular TV pundit. Apparently, you first picked up the ball age 6, which actually is, I mean, it's not that young. They're younger. My son, 4, I think he started, but he kept dropping it. But you played for the same team as your mum and your sister, which is an amazing achievement as well. Medway Rugby Football Club. So with such an amazing CV and such a busy life, we are really honoured to have you. Lastly, we've got Owen Jones, our Journo. And fantastic to have you. You've been writing and editing stories and news about rugby since 2004. He edits the matchday programmes for the WRU publications for the British and Irish Lions, written for the Guinness Pro 14, regular voice on BBC Radio Wales, was the editor of Rugby World Mag, and recently writing for Rugby Pass, currently the Northern Hemisphere editor for the 15, an online rugby journal. Your contact list apparently is of who's who in rugby is incredible, so we'll be picking your brains for that. And when he's away from his writing desk, apparently, sadly, he's a Liverpool Football Club fan, loves gadgets, but not webcams and lighting by the look of things, and he loves waxing lyrical about growing up in Cardiff. So that's the panel. What a great panel it is, and we're honoured to have you all. We really are. Let's talk about rugby then. The first thing that's definitely on everybody's lips at the moment is the British Lions. So Owen, bring us up to speed where we are, what's going on, what's happening with the tour dates, that kind of thing.
Well, I was quite excited to get my invite to the squad announcement on May the 6th. I think with anything with the Lions at the moment, you are just ticking off the boxes. There's been the coaching announcement. There's still talks about, the ratified fixture list. I think they're talking about 2 bases now of Johannesburg, which is about 1,500 meters, kind of is at altitude really for any of us Brits, and going over to Cape Town. I think if we take a look at the kind of bigger picture, if we all get 3 test series and a winner, I think everybody in rugby can feel pretty happy that we've managed to get that far, because at so many junctures over the last 6-9 months, we've thought, are we going to get a Lions tour in 2021? And there's obviously everybody has been able to throw in their opinions on whether it should have been in Australia, been in the UK, United Arab Emirates, whether it should have been thrown forward to 2022. But I think for most rugby fans, after a fairly tortuous year, I think to have a Lions series this summer is something that we should all try and make the best of. So that's what I'm saying in little bite-sized pieces.
Fantastic.
So Owen, if you've got an invite to the squad announcement, being a Welshman, that probably means you're selected in the squad.
Pretty proud. Take along my boots, Bruce. Hey, we haven't started the chat about this Scottish inclusion. It's far too early in the morning for that.
Are we going to have any England players at all, Rachel? That's the question. Let's balance this out a bit.
Well, for all English fans, we do really hope so. I mean, yeah, as Owen's saying there, kind of you're starting to feel all the announcements coming out. It's starting to feel real. It feels like it is happening. And, everybody gets so behind the British and Irish Lions. But the chatter around whether English players will be available, whether they'll put themselves in the mix to be selected, let alone to be picked, it is kind of another point for discussion.
And you spoke quickly there, Owen, about altitude and about the fact that the preparations are going to be different. Obviously at the moment we've heard a lot about players not being released and all those sort of things that are going on. Is that going to make a big impact on the team?
Well, at the moment, there are questions unanswered because the Premiership final is going to take place on the same day. I think it's June 26th as the first Lions warm-up game up in Edinburgh against Japan. So at the moment, there is a little, as it happens seemingly every 4 years between Premiership rugby and the Lions, about player release, and Warren Gatland, as usual, throws in a little grenade, and then you get a few kind of shots back, and usually it all comes together, but there's always that threat. I mean, look, we've all seen with the shenanigans with the Super League, it doesn't always go right. Things can blow up in faces, but you hope every England player, I would imagine, would be desperate to get on that tour. I think, being part of a Lions tour is still, I speak to so many players, it's still the ultimate, and it's not forgotten about when you unlace your boots for the final time, because you can get players like the John Bentleys from 1997. It really is a ticket to the after-dinner speaking circuit for many, many years afterwards. It really is. So it's something that is still kind of held in the highest esteem amongst players. We just need the administrators to kind of, sing from the same hymn sheet.
And Bruce, what's exciting you up there in Scotland about the Lions tour?
The first thing is that there's genuinely players who have stuck their hand up, and we've kind of dealt with some of the issues that Warren Gatland had mentioned before, that Scottish teams can't win away from home. Unfortunately, we then shot ourselves in the foot and we couldn't win at home. But the players, for me, there's a lot of chat about Gregor being involved in the coaching team, which means Scottish players will have a voice. I'm not convinced that is as powerful as maybe as it used to be. But the makeup of the tour, it's going to be short. There's going to be a lot of time spent together because they won't be able to socialise in the way that they did before. So what happens off the pitch is going to be absolutely crucial. And it's been well documented, and probably by Owen and some of his journalistic mates who know how important it's been not to have divisions in the camp, or a definite midweek squad and a definite test squad, and players to have a shout, and all those bits that go into the mix that it's hard for laymen like me to see. So Gregor will be able to say, here's what this Scottish player will bring off the field. And that's where I hope guys like Jamie Ritchie, I love Jamie Ritchie. I think he's a phenomenal player. He's a young guy who's matured very quickly through things that have happened in his personal life, but also on the field and the role he's been given at Edinburgh. Everyone's talking about Hamish Watson because there's some former players who like to get some likes on Twitter with being a bit controversial about him being too small and all those bits and pieces. I mean, it's a piece of nonsense. You saw what Hamish Watson can do. Finn Russell, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure he fits with what Warren Gatland wants. Stuart Hogg, someone's come out this week and said Stuart Hogg. I'm not even going to mention who it was because I don't think it's worth giving him the credit for it, because I think it's a piece of absolute nonsense. But there are genuinely guys now who can be selected. I would like to see Finn Russell and Stuart Hogg make themselves first choice high percentage goal kickers. The ship has kind of sailed for that one for this tour, but I think that would certainly help a Scottish back get themselves on tour. And then there are guys like Cammy Redpath, who unfortunately only got one kick of the ball, but is getting rave reviews. So I think it's really that this will be represented up here, and getting to have the game against Japan. I mean, I'm just desperate to be there. I've never been to a Lions game before, so this is a big moment for me, for the city, for the country, to host the British Lions. And there are a lot of Scottish Lions who have contributed hugely to the history, and it would be phenomenal to have them on our own doorstep.
Fabulous. And Rachel, from a England point of view, no England coaches at the moment. Is that going to impact on our players?
I think, like Bruce was saying there, like how much weight do the particular coaches from the nationalities have in that room? They must have some influence, but I think, ultimately that coaching team want to pick the best, and whether there's a coach involved from the union or not, they're going to want to be looking at the players who are going to bring the most on pitch and also off the pitch to really drive the Lions in the test games. So I don't think it's a negative. Obviously, having a union voice in there does add weight, but I think the rugby speaks for itself for players. Just like Bruce is saying there, over the Six Nations, Scotland players have definitely played themselves into it, with or without Gregor in there. They put their hand up to be noticed.
And there's been a lot of talk sort of in the press at the moment about, is it going to be Owen Jones? Is it going to be Maro Itoje? Who's going to be captain? We can have our predictions later, but do you think that's helpful at the moment?
Is that for me?
Go on, Owen. He's got something to say on it.
Yeah, massive. Put me
He can't wait. Look at him. He's ready.
On the captaincy. Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? I think, as far back as 2014 when he won, when the under-20s won the World Championships, Maro Itoje has been pinpointed as that future England captain. It's what they used to say about Mike Atherton, the England cricketer, that he was a future England captain. He's got all the kind of characteristics of a captain, but the reality is he's barely captained any side. Brad Barrett was obviously hugely brave Saracens captain. Owen Farrell clearly is in the thoughts, I think, of Warren Gatland, and of course you've got Owen Jones, 147 caps for Wales, 9 caps. He started in every test pretty much for the Lions in the last 12 years. And I don't know what that bloke is made of. He's signed up for another year. He'll be nearly 37. And there are obviously people thinking he could go to 2023. And I think for any of us, I was too short to play in the second row. But being in the engine room for that long, he's played well over 400 games. And he kind of leaves it all out there. He must be a masochist to just keep going. So whether they'll feel that, they want someone, I think they'll go with a forward, actually. I think they will want. I think they famously in '97, wasn't it? They think Ian McGeechan wanted a captain who could look, down at Gary Teichmann. So they picked 6'7" Martin Johnson because they want that physical intimidation. No offense to Hoggy, but he's about my size. He's not going to be looking up at. I said Sia Cleese a little bit bigger. So it's a real toss-up. I know Sam Warburton's kind of backed. Maro Itoje. Ken Owens again is, whether he's worth his place, but he is a real leader. So, to sit on the fence, as Sam Warburton said, there's a lot of really, really good readers there. But if you had to push me, I'd say Owen Jones might just nick it.
I think that's one of the big conversations, though, isn't it? It's what do you want your captain to be? 97 Johnson was probably the only player who was a stick-on test starter when they got on the plane and left. And he wasn't a captain then, and the Lions tour really gave him that leadership opportunity, and he made such a fabulous job of it. There's so much baggage around Maro Itoje's playing for Saracens. England didn't do well. If England had been flying in the Six Nations, I think he would have been an absolute stick-on. Do you go with Alan Wynne, been there, done it, round the block, knows what's happening, but potentially might not be in the test team? But at the moment, who is going to be in the test team? It's nigh on impossible to pick it. And really, one of the things we've been talking about with my sort of rugby circle, we pick our squad, but then we pick the squad we think Gatlin will choose. And there's a lot of difference in there. And I think it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, the announcement of the squad, but who he picks as captain and if he gives any sort of justification for that. And Gregor has been captain, 2 vice captains, and been very, very strict in that, and having lots of leaders, and someone goes off and that person becomes captain, and then that vice captain goes off, and it's been really quite clear for Scotland. Now, I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, and I don't know what Warren Gatland will select, but to have Alan Wynne considered again is absolutely phenomenal. But I do wonder if England players were managed in the way Welsh players and Irish players and Scottish players are, would we be seeing some England players last a bit longer, or take on that responsibility on top of being hammered week in, week out in Premiership, then being released to England, then going on tours? So I think there's a big discussion for another day where we talk about calendar and player management, and Burf probably has, well, definitely has more than me, because as my introduction, it sounds like I'm a joker that's never touched the ball. So I'll let Burf take over on that one.
Well, there's a lot of subject matter there, isn't there? But is that a problem then, Rachel? Do you see that as being the reason why there's not as many England players this year?
Yeah, I think that's probably another episode to talk on player load and calendars and everything, and work's trying to be done to sort all of that out. But I think Gatland's going to probably look at choosing someone that he can really trust and rely on immediately. We've talked about some of the areas where maybe pulling the team together, the time together, the difference of the format. So he's going to need somebody that can almost pull in all the players pretty quickly, get them all around. He's trialed, he's tested, he's playing outstanding. I don't really understand how he's never taken a step backwards as he gets older with age. It's definitely something in the Welsh waters that we need to get a hold of, that's for sure. But yeah, I guess hopefully that they'll find some solutions leading into the tests, and how Premiership rugby can look after those England players.
And just a quick final bit on this sort of area of the Lions tour. We're talking about the issues for the home nations, but there's a lot of difficulties in South Africa getting their team together this time. We haven't had the best record over the 120 years of history playing against South Africa, but is this our opportunity?
It is. I mean, it's been over 500 days since the Springboks last played together. They must be so bored, probably, of talking about the win in Japan, because most professional athletes, which I can't claim to be one, but Rachel, you kind of want to always look forward. You can't just always regale about what you've done, and they've got issues. I mean, some people will say, well, the Lions, the team that they put out, they want to play together before, but they have been incredibly disrupted. You must remember that maybe 6 to 8 players are playing regularly in Europe. You look at the kind of Faf Clerks, Lou Diagas, they are playing regularly, but there are a clutch of players based in South Africa who are barely playing, and they've got key players like Andre Pollard's been out with an ACL injury since September. He's just about ready to come back. Pieter-Steph du Toit, who's the kind of World Player of the Year, he's been out. He nearly had a leg amputated. He had such a serious injury last year. So some of their players, you could say, are going to be very, very ring rusty. But, in Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber, they've got 2 very, very smart coaches, and you can't discount the South African pride. I mean, again, if anyone remembers that 2009 tour, the second test, it was like 6 Lions players were in hospital after that second test. It was probably the most brutal test ever. Dislocated shoulders, cheekbones gone. It was, they don't mess around over in South Africa. If you've seen the likes of Eben Etzebeth and RG Snyman, guys who are at 6'8", they are absolute monsters. So Gats is going to have to take a fairly abrasive physical side over there, albeit one that's, you could say, is undercooked.
I'm still not sure though, because until the results are in, if South Africa get beat, it's because they were ring rusty and didn't get rugby and they weren't together. If they win, it's because they were fresh and they weren't mentally exhausted. And it's how can you predict? Look at the Lions tours since '97. How could we have seen that car crash coming? How could we have seen what happened in New Zealand? It's so difficult. And that Lions squad, with that mix of coaches, I'm really interested to see how that mix of coaches goes, because there's some pretty experienced guys who have been on Lions tours and been part of Gatland's squad, and now they're not there. So some of the players returning are coming into what is a reasonably fresh environment. It might be quite refreshing to get into that situation with other players, with other experiences. The challenge of South Africa, which they've not had for, there's not been the autumn test to get involved in. So I think they'll be ready for a punt at it. The South Africa in their own back garden, they are going to come hell for leather. And like you've said, Owen, it's going to be brutal. They're going to knock people over. And I think they're going to be foaming at the mouth to get going for this.
And Rachel, how do you prepare for that as a player? How do you come from sort of, your Premiership games, not a huge full season, not as many games as there could have been. Suddenly you're off to South Africa into a brutal cauldron. How do you prepare for that kind of environment that's coming up?
I think firstly, like, players want to be a part of it and they're excited about it. So, they jump on board very quickly. There'll be a lot of planning and preparation that the coaches will be putting in to make sure that they can seamlessly get into that environment and, catering for what the needs are. But I think more than anything, players are, Owen spoke about how, it is the pinnacle of anyone's rugby career. They all want to be a Lion and have that and wear that jersey. So I think, preparation is key, and it's probably more for the coaches to be able to manage that environment, for them to seamlessly come into it and to kind of flourish immediately.